What's up, comic and pop culture fans? This is James with Mint Hunter Comics, and today we are talking about the lasting legacy and appeal of Batman. Because I gotta tell you, a multi-gajillionaire trust fund kid who's obsessed with bats doesn't sound like it would last for almost 90 years of popularity, but I guess we were just all wrong, weren't we? Today we're going to talk about, I could give you honestly 100 reasons, but just 10 reasons why I think Batman is here to stay. First things first, what I want you to do is like and comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe up. We actually have a sponsor for today's video, and it is Wakum, which is going to be making comic book collecting and tracing your collection a hell of a lot easier and actually funner too. With Wakum, I can take any comic book or graphic novel. Here's Batman Damned, because today we're talking about Batman. I can take it, I can find the UPC code on the back, and all I have to do is scan it, and it comes up showing the book. You can mark it as, yes, it's in my collection. You can mark it as read, and obviously you can look up the book manually, but scanning the UPC is way more fun. Frankly, I don't know why that didn't exist before. It's such a great idea. But one of the things is you can check in on your friend's collection and see what they're up to date on their reading, so you can facilitate trades. You can look at your own collection. You can sort your own collection. You can show yourself what you've read because they have something that marks it as read, not just collected. And you can go into as much detail as you want. You could even write down the approximate grade and all that. But this is the best way to sort your comic book collection. I don't know why it took me that long to learn about this, but it's super awesome. So you're going to want to check it out. Oh, and it's free. Yeah. So, Batman, we got to talk about him. Why is he so popular? What is this lasting appeal of this dude? And I'm going to start you off with my first reason, and that is, number one, that it is rooted in pain and tragedy. When he was just a little boy, Batman's parents were brutally murdered right in front of him in a tragic accident that would redefine his entire life and his path. He swore an oath, and you kind of know how the rest goes. Well, this very real rooted in tragedy stance is something that helps to make him a little bit more relatable. A lot of people in their lives experience tragedy in one way or another. In the end of the day, he's got his moral code and his guidance, and he's got his friends, and he's got everything he's framed for his world, but he still wants his parents, and he can't get that back. And that's something really unique about Batman, where, you get a lot of characters that have lost loved ones in some way or another. But this one, as a little boy, the way it happened, it framed everything that we would know about the character to this day. And how they call back to it constantly reminds us of his extreme tragedy and his post-traumatic stress. And the best Batman stories do incorporate that in some small way. He's afraid to let go, he can't seem to move on. It all plays a part into who he was and what happened that night. He can't let that moment go. That's the moment that meant the most to him. And that's one thing about the Batman is deep down, he's still, despite all his training with Ra's al Ghul in the mountains, he's still a wounded little boy. It just makes for a much more interesting character, frankly. Number two is the detective angle. So the start of the best stories are always Greek tragedies, right? Hero's journey, okay? And mysteries. That is Batman in a nutshell. All those classic tropes that we as readers and watchers love out of certain characters so we can feel something is all embodied with this dude. The detective angle often leads Batman stories to have a very mystery element to them. It's not just, here's a bad guy, you gotta go save the day. Usually, and the best writers can handle this, it's a detective story that's tackled well. Oftentimes working outside of the law and the limits that the law of the Gotham Police Department have. You see, Batman didn't just train to be the best martial arts dude on the planet, he also worked his mind, and he ended up being, as they say, the world's greatest detective. So a lot of times with Batman stories, especially in the comics, there's usually like a grand finale, a final payoff, the culmination of everything that's been messed around and played with you. You don't know who the killer is, and it has a grand reveal. And those types of stories are set up by that detective framework. So with Batman stories and certain arcs, there's always this need to keep reading to learn what happens. That gives him a huge leg up over a lot of heroes. A lot of heroes have to resort to stories between interrelationships and what it makes to be themselves. Well, Batman stories are oftentimes classic mystery novels. It's fantastic, man. How about number 3 in that he's vulnerable? I'm sorry, what powers does Batman have? Nada. He's got to rely on all his severe training and all of his knowledge. He's got a good brain up there. Well, it doesn't mean he's not vulnerable. I love watching Batman the animated series and seeing certain episodes where he gets jumped and knocked out even by some common thugs sometimes. Batman is just a dude. He might be a more disciplined and hardcore version of pretty much anyone you know, but he is just a guy at the end of the day. In the comics, in the shows, and the movies, he is vulnerable. He is not Superman. And while you see plenty of stories where he's the smartest one in the room and he's able to well surpass his physical restrictions, at the end of the day, a lot of that is his prep time, and if he doesn't have it, he could get knocked on his ass. As funny as it sounds with a bunch of fans that like superhero stuff, people kind of like the actual ones where it's most relatable to an actual human. And that's what Batman is. He's just a human. He's not an alien from Krypton. He's not a Martian from Mars. He didn't get bit by a radioactive bat. He's just rich, and he just has some of the most determination that there is. Number 4, he is a terrible and also the best father. So a lot of the best Batman stories, if it's not detective-based, is often father and son, the relationship with his Robins and the rest of the Bat family. And in newer iterations of comics, the him and Thomas Wayne relationship with the Flashpoint Batman. Batman is an absolutely trash father. He indoctrinates his children into wars that they don't have a choice. He doesn't give them a choice when they seriously want to have one. He's constantly exposing them to danger. He's getting them in trouble. The death of Jason Todd was single-handedly his greatest failure and one of his biggest tragedies, almost even trumping his family's death. Now, why does that make him actually interesting? Well, I have a theory that terrible father-based stories are often some of the most popular ones out there. Maybe it's just something a lot of us can unfortunately relate to, but Bruce definitely has good intentions, but he gets clouded by his constant war on crime. All at the same time, he's kind of the best father because he's the most overprotective dad you could possibly ever ask for. And he has some beautiful moments, like when he adopts Tim Drake. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's a beautiful moment, and that shows the softer, best dad version of him. But then, you get all the problems that he has with Damian Wayne, and I love the stories where he doesn't know what to say to Damian. Something horrible has happened, and he can't find a comforting word. And Oracle has to be like, dude, talk to your son. What are you doing? I love that type of stuff. I love that he recognizes that his war on crime is not good for these kids, but he has to do it anyway. In most Batman and Robin stories, he's robbing them of some form of choice. It happens a lot. Already you have a really compelling character that's got the brains, that's got the detective chops, but he's also constantly learning as an actual dad and parent figure, and that makes him way more interesting. Number 5, we gotta go with absurdity. I mean, he is a billionaire who puts on a bat head and goes out and punches crime in the face. His villains are penguins, crocodiles, spiders, and cats, so it's a little bit ridiculous, but there's a little bit of that early camp that everyone enjoys. When you look at the Adam West TV show, they really leaned into the campiness, and the absurdity was put on full show. The absurdity has been a little bit dialed back to put it in a setting of a more realistic environment, but at the end of the day, it's pure fantasy. You have a poison ivy that's able to run the entire city with her plants. Scarecrow's able to poison the entire water supply, making everyone susceptible to fear. It makes for great villains, but it also makes for a completely absurd escape from reality. While we can relate to Batman because he's human and they put the work into making him a relatable character, when he's flying overhead of Gotham and punching Kite Man in the face, that's when you have to appreciate the absurdity a little bit. Number 6, alternate versions. So many times when you get alternate versions of a character, they're just evil. Well, that's a little boring. Batman's character is so fleshed out that he's able to have so many different iterations of him. A serial killer hunter, a Green Lantern, a vampire. I could honestly do a whole video talking about how interesting his Owlman counterpart is. When you have a character like Batman that's been written for so many years, and everyone knows all of his nuances because you've done a good job of relaying who he is. You can have a Green Lantern version. You can have a vampire version where he has to still stick to his moral code but fight his own bloodlust. You can have the Flashpoint Thomas Wayne version, which wants to protect his son and prevent him from being Batman. There's just so many angles and alternate versions of Batman that are completely palatable due to the inherent nature of the character himself. Almost any fan fiction writer can pick up a pencil and start writing a story about Batman in some alternate dimension and have it be pretty fantastic because there's just so much source material to go off of. Now for one of my favorite reasons. He is the scariest rogue out of all the rogues gallery. Hardcore Batman comic book fans know this. And that is, out of all of his rogues, all of his villains, Gotham is equally as scared of Batman as they are the others. When they see that bat symbol in the sky, it tells the citizens of Gotham, don't steal, be good, the big bad Batman might get you. And part of that is because instead of being the poster face for Gotham, he's more of like a myth, a legend, a shadow in the darkness that has turned into a bit of a boogeyman story. That circles back to our first item on this list with that vow he made, and he instills fear into the guilty of Gotham. But with that comes a lot of fear aftermath, that a lot of people are afraid of him. I love those comic book panels where he comes up on a group of thugs and they just run the opposite direction. Because Batman's supposed to be a scary dude. He's worked really hard at it. Next up is his moral code and the fact that he doesn't kill. Batman's problems would be a lot of ways solved if he did cross that line. But because he chooses to not cross that line, it makes for a more compelling story. Joker many times will escape and wreak havoc on Gotham and possibly kill people, but Batman still can't kill Joker because he does not kill. He knows that if he crosses the line, it will spoil the legend of Batman and what Batman is supposed to be for Gotham. And then he'll just be truly another rogue's villain after all. He has to be better. He has to be something a man can't. He has to be something more. He knows that the men and women of Gotham can get upset and take matters into their own hands. That's just a vigilante. He's more than a vigilante. He has to be something no one else can be. That is the whole point and essence of Batman. But because of that, his villains can really get to play around with that and see what they can get away with. It makes for scarier villains. It makes for a more compelling story of how are you going to do this without crossing that line, and how are you going to be tested up against that line. There's a lot of heroes out there that have kind of jumped on that bandwagon of the whole I can't kill. But I think it works best with Batman because of that legend, of that myth status. He won't cross that line, even if it means alienating his family, even if it means letting the Joker live, even if it means anything. There are sacrifices he will not make. And oftentimes, it has really negative consequences. And therein lies a great story. Alright, number 9, he has the best supporting characters. From Alfred to Killer Croc, he's got the best villains and sidekicks, I guess for lack of a better term we could call them, in the game. Batman supporting characters all are able to have fantastic runs on their own and be interesting and still be bestsellers. Why is it that Nightwing is one of DC's bestsellers right now? Probably it's because Dick Grayson is such a fleshed out individual. What helps Dick Grayson to be such an interesting character? The odd relationship with his father, Bruce Wayne. It all comes back to the father thing, I'm telling you. He doesn't want to repeat the same mistakes that Batman did. He doesn't want to make choices for everyone. He wants to be someone completely different. He's not the same legend. He's more vigilante. He wants to go his own route. He wants to help the police force more directly. Tim Drake wants to build a better Gotham, and he's really the smart computer whiz in the room. Jason Todd is a burned hothead that feels like he has to take justice into his own hands, so you get a very cool Punisher-esque angle. Damian Wayne was brought up by a group of assassins and has to learn how to become better for society after growing up in such a traumatic way. And you already know how fleshed out and amazing the villains are, from Mr. Freeze all the way into the ridiculous amount of care and backstory put into Kite Man. There's so much care for the Gotham Batman universe. The Bat family storytelling alone can hold up if Batman were to disappear for a year, because his presence would still be felt, and those characters are unique enough that those stories would thrive. And number 10, I think that we got to talk about the flexibility. Kind of brings me back to a couple of the other points, but when it comes to movies, you're able to have a lot of different iterations of Batman. The most recent Batman movie was an experienced Batman, awesome detective story that learns how to not just be fear for the city, but learn to be a source of hope. Then you have the Christopher Nolan ones, where it's a much more grounded in reality take, where he learns how to be a legend, and he learns what he can be more as a symbol rather than a flawed man. In the Justice League movie, he learns how he can be a leader and a source of inspiration. There's a lot of flexibility with Batman, and you can kind of take him in whatever angle you really want to within the grounds of the character himself. Because he's been so fleshed out, everybody knows his nuances, and directors can see Batman in a different way, and we're left with some really good stuff. Whereas there are characters out there that are a bit more two-dimensional, that if a movie comes out, you kind of know what you're going to get, and if you stray from that, it doesn't really feel like that character. It's interesting, there's so much creative freedom with Batman, even though he's a character that has very specific things that everybody knows about him. It would seem stifling as a writer, but instead, it really lets it blossom into anything they want it to be. And those really are just some of the reasons why Batman has such a lasting appeal. Let me know down in the comments, why do you think Batman lasted 80 years and will probably easily last another? What is it about the dude in your eyes that transcends other characters, that makes him an amazing character that's going to be around forever? Like and comment down below on your way out, and as always, keep on hunting.